What's going on, guys? It's John DeYong here, and today I want to talk to you about how the yearly property cycles play out on a month-to-month basis. And then I'll follow up with some market conditions that may impact these cycles in 2020. Hopefully this will help you in planning out your next property purchase. Obviously, as we saw between 2017 and 2019, other market conditions can have a serious impact on consumer confidence. Specifically, federal elections with proposed policy changes that would impact property investors, regulators such as APRA playing with the financial levers, and other economic drivers such as the cash rate. So every year can be very different depending on these other factors and how heavily the media reports on them. The media has a phenomenal reach, and depending on how they relay the message, it could be perceived in the wrong way or at a very extreme level, such as this 60-minute segment that suggested that property markets were going to crash by 40%. The following yearly cycle will be based on a typical year growing at the average rate without any significant external intervention. And it's mostly driven by our seasons, our holiday periods, and our human emotions trying to predict when we think it's going to be the best time to either buy or sell property. Although these cycles are generally replicated in all markets and states, this walkthrough will have a bias towards the Melbourne market, as that's what I know best. Also, auction campaigns are more apparent in the Melbourne property market than other states, and you'll see why they have a significant impact. Starting off in January, it's a pretty slow month because a lot of people are still on extended holidays between Christmas and Australia Day. So it's not an ideal time to think about buying or selling, because even if you're not away on holidays yourself, a lot of potential buyers or homeowners might be on holidays themselves. For those who do decide to list their property in January, normally the earliest we come back to work is the first week after the new year. And if you think about an auction campaign, it usually takes about 4 to 5 weeks to roll out before the actual auction day. This means the earliest we really start to see auctions and clearance rates being reported is the first week of February. This is when the property cycle really kicks off for the year, as we start to see some new listings come through onto the market, and auctions ramping up in mid-February. Most people taking extended holidays are usually back to work and into routine by now, and we start to see a lot more action starting to take place. With almost 2 months of stagnation between December and January, anyone who missed out on buying or selling late in the previous year is coming back guns blazing to make a deal happen. They've just had 2 months off with free time to think about how they missed out last year, and they're not going to make the same mistake this year. On top of that, we have all of the New Year's resolutionists who want to make a change in their lifestyle, the holiday goers who want to buy a holiday home in the location they've only spent 5 days in, and the family gatherings which cause families to either want to move closer together or further apart. In combination, this usually creates the highest clearance rate season of the year, between mid-February and late March. And then people start to plan and go on their Easter holidays. And as before, sellers are either going away or on a break, and they don't necessarily want to sell their homes over the holiday season. Talking of festive seasons, could you give me something to celebrate by smashing that like button? The same is true for buyers, but that doesn't have as big of a consequence as sellers, because when homeowners aren't selling, there's less stock available on the market, and we see a supply shortage over this period. And due to the sale process being quite clunky, finding an agent, getting contracts done, figuring out where to live next, this generally slows down the market. When a buyer is hot, it doesn't really matter about their holiday. They can come back and the next weekend they'll be bidding at auctions or making offers. It's not as big of a process to get going again if they were already looking to buy and had everything in order before their break. This immediate pent-up demand then creates a surcharge in the market late April and into May. Early May, we start to see those sellers back from their holidays list their properties, and a whole bunch of new stock comes back onto the market. And it sits pretty neutral on that supply and demand ratio in mid-May until it starts getting a little bit colder, especially down here in Melbourne. Just like it's harder to get out of bed on a colder morning, we become more lethargic in the property market too. All of the buyers that have been trying to find the perfect property since the start of the year are now starting to get over the whole process. They've been outbidded too many times at auctions or missed out on their dream home, and they're now a little bit disheartened, quickly getting over all of the real estate agent calls and emails. The same happens for sellers. There's no real bounce in their step to sell their property. Their plants and grasses aren't flourishing like they were in the warmer weather. It's gloomy or raining outside most days, and there's not a lot of natural light coming through into their property. The market always seems to slow down over this winter period. Then of course we have the end of financial year through June and July. So a lot of people are ensuring that they've got their tax returns in order, getting depreciation schedules written up, maybe fitting in some last minute renovations, and are generally focused on their current setting rather than finding a new one. Again, to throw in another holiday season, us Aussies do love our holidays. June, July, August is the warmest season for Europe. And all of those who are trying to escape the cold weather, especially down here in Melbourne, generally organise their longer holidays over this period. So due to the low amount of stock available on the market through winter, there's been this demand snowball effect taking place in the background since early May. Buyers desperate to find the perfect property will snatch up a good listing quite quickly after it comes onto the market. Just like the sunshine coming through after a gloomy winter, we then come into spring and we start to see a lot more listings flow onto the market. The fresh spring air and the flourishing backyards brings life in many forms, especially into the property sector. Spring is the last real push for the year. With a big increase on stock on market, the good ones usually go first, followed by the B and C grade properties. And then as buyers begin to feel burnt out, they'll start saying things like, oh, this property will do, or I'm not going to miss out on another one. A grade properties will still come onto the market throughout this period, but we generally start to see the market fizzle off through October and November. Auction clearance rates start to slow down, and when we see the Christmas decorations hit the stores, which seems to get earlier and earlier every year, that Christmas season break mentality kicks in. Christmas parties are now getting booked as early as mid-November, and between then and the 25th of December, it feels like the days are just dragging on. The workforce is focused at getting everything wrapped up for the year, and then they're planning their summer holidays in their spare time, which doesn't leave much time for property in between. I've found this period between mid-November and late December is a great time to buy property, as everyone else seems to be distracted and demand simmers down to a manageable level. Supply is still steady and there's no reason for great properties not to come onto the market and be snapped up just before the festive season. Until of course the year wraps up a weekend or two before Christmas. People start going away, organising their Christmas hams, and the last thing on their mind is property inspections and checking contracts of sale. And from there, the cycle repeats itself next year. So in summary, February, May and October are months of higher than normal demand. In early March and late September, we start to see more stock come onto the market. January, April, June and July are disrupted by the holiday seasons and end of financial year. And in my opinion, November and December are the best times to buy. As a follow-up from this though, the best time to buy is when you can afford to do so. Market conditions and individual circumstances are always changing. So don't try and hold out on buying property to try and time the market, as they say, because something could seriously change in the meantime and you may cause you to miss out on property altogether. Up until this point, the video has been pretty generic around the yearly season. But let's get into some of the situations that would cause external factors to impact the property market in 2020. If you're keen for more content, make sure you subscribe and smash that notification button so you don't miss a video. If we continue to see the cash rate come down to 0.5% or even 0.25%, this will flow through to interest rates and we'll be paying less again for our mortgage repayments. Essentially, this is where the term money is cheap comes in, because it costs much less to borrow more money. If the cash rate gets to 0.25 basis points and the economy is still weak, Philip Lowe said that this would trigger the start of quantitative easing, which essentially means they print money out of thin air through buying stocks and then that gets injected back into the economy, which means people have more money to spend, and we generally see goods such as fruits and vegetable prices skyrocket as they soak up this additional cash injection. You may think that this would be good for property prices because we have more cash to spend. But at a time of a weak economy, big financial transactions are the last thing on people's minds, especially if unemployment and underemployment are increasing and the population's main focus is to keep food on their table. And this is why we see those food prices start to increase. This is all a very doom and gloom scenario, by the way. So instead, if we see the economy is recovering, but we still see those interest rates lowering down, this would fuel the property market and we'd probably see some investors flood back into the market after a 2-year hiatus. If this happened, we'd most likely see APRA step in again and put some serious restraints on investor lending so that the housing market doesn't surcharge too far out of control. Lastly, we commonly hear people talking about the first home loan deposit scheme throwing in a whole lot of first home buyers into the market. I disagree with this though, as there's only 10,000 spots available now and another 10,000 available at the start of financial year. So 20,000 in total for the year, compared to the usual 110,000 first home buyers that purchase a new home every single year. It will have an impact, but not really a significant chunk of that market. I want to know what you guys think about the yearly cycles and what you have seen in different seasons. Leave a comment down below. As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, taxation, and property investing advice for your current situation. These videos are just my opinion and are general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. If you're keen for more content, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss a video. And until next time, happy house hunting.